The sky above Earth turned dark as thousands of alien ships descended from the vast emptiness of space. Their massive forms blocked out the sun, casting long shadows over the planet below. These ships were unlike anything humanity had ever seen. Each vessel was shaped like a jagged blade, its surface shimmering with an otherworldly metallic glow. They moved in perfect formation, silent and deadly, surrounding Earth like a predator circling its prey. For years, humanity had speculated about the existence of extraterrestrial life. Some hoped for peaceful contact, while others feared invasion. No one imagined it would happen so suddenly or with such overwhelming force. The United Earth Defense Council scrambled to respond, launching every available ship into orbit. Squadrons of fighter jets roared into the sky, their engines screaming defiance against the invaders. But the human fleet was no match for the advanced technology of the Galactic Armada. Within hours, Earth's defenses crumbled. Ships exploded, in bursts of flame, their debris raining down like fiery meteors. Communication channels filled with panicked voices before falling eerily silent. Amid the chaos, a single outpost remained untouched. Outpost Epsilon, located on Europa, one of Jupiter's icy moons, was far enough from Earth to avoid immediate detection. It was a small facility, designed for scientific research rather than combat. The team stationed there consisted of just 12 people led by Commander Daniel Hayes. A man in his late 30s, Daniel had spent most of his career working in deep space operations. His face bore the marks of stress and sleepless nights, but his eyes remained sharp and focused. Beside him was Lieutenant Rachel Monroe, a skilled tactician with a calm demeanor that masked her fierce determination. When news of the invasion reached them, the crew gathered in the outpost's main control room. Screens displayed live footage of the battle raging around Earth. Explosions lit up the darkness of space, and the once proud human fleet dwindled before their eyes. "It's happening," muttered Ethan Cole, the outpost's chief engineer. He adjusted his glasses nervously, his fingers tapping against the console in front of him. "They're wiping us out." Daniel stood at the center of the room, his arms crossed as he watched the unfolding disaster. His jaw tightened and he exhaled slowly. "We're all that's left," he said finally, his voice steady despite the weight of his words. The room fell silent. Everyone knew what he meant. If Earth fell, humanity's survival depended on them, and they were painfully aware of how unprepared they were for such a responsibility. Rachel stepped forward, breaking the tension. "We have the quantum disruptor," she reminded the group. Her tone was firm, though her hands trembled slightly as she gestured toward the large machine dominating one corner of the control room. The quantum disruptor was a prototype weapon, developed by scientists back on Earth. Designed to study anomalies in space-time, it had never been tested in combat. Its potential power was immense, capable of destabilizing energy fields over vast distances. However, activating it prematurely carried significant risks, not only to the outpost but possibly to Europa itself. Ethan frowned, rubbing the back of his neck. "It wasn't built for this," he pointed out. "If we screw it up, we could tear this whole place apart." "We don't have a choice," Daniel replied sharply. His gaze swept across the room, meeting the eyes of each crew member. "If we do nothing, we're dead anyway. At least this way we have a chance." The rest of the team exchanged uneasy glances. Laura Bennett, the outpost's medic, shifted uncomfortably in her seat. She was younger than most of the others, barely in her mid-20s, but her presence brought a sense of calm to the group. "What about Earth?" she asked quietly. "Is there any word?" Daniel shook his head. "Nothing. All communications are down." He paused, letting the reality sink in. "For now, we focus on what we can control. Ethan, I need you to start running diagnostics on the disruptor. Rachel, monitor incoming data. Look for any signs of movement near Europa. The rest of you prepare the outpost for defense. We don't know when or if they'll find us." As the crew dispersed to carry out their tasks, Daniel lingered in the control room, staring at the screens showing Earth under siege. Flames engulfed cities, and oceans churned violently as shockwaves from orbital bombardments rippled through the atmosphere. It was a scene straight out of humanity's worst nightmares. Yet amid the destruction, something caught his attention. A faint signal emanating from deep within Europa's ice. At first, he thought it might be interference or a malfunction in the Outpost sensors, but as he zoomed in on the readings, he realized it was something else entirely. The signal pulsed rhythmically, almost like a heartbeat. "Ethan," Daniel called out, his voice tinged with urgency. "Come take a look at this." Ethan hurried over, peering at the data. His expression shifted from confusion to fascination. "That's not natural," he murmured. "It's too precise. Someone or something put it there." Daniel nodded grimly. "Whatever it is, it's buried deep. Could it be related to the aliens?" "Maybe," Ethan admitted. "Or maybe it's something else entirely. Either way, we should check it out." Before they could discuss further, alarms blared throughout the outpost. Rachel's voice crackled over the intercom. "Commander, we've got movement. Multiple contacts approaching Europa." Daniel's heart sank. They had run out of time. The alarms continued to blare as the crew of Outpost Epsilon scrambled to respond. Rachel Monroe's voice remained calm but firm over the intercom, relaying updates to the team. "Multiple contacts detected. They're moving fast. Estimated. Time to Europa, 30 minutes. Her words sent a ripple of tension through the outpost. Everyone knew what was at stake. If the alien ships found them, they wouldn't stand a chance. Commander Daniel Hayes wasted no time. "Ethan, keep working on the disruptor. Chris, man the turrets. Laura, prep the medical bay in case we take damage." He turned to Rachel. "Here with me. We need to monitor those ships and figure out their trajectory." The team moved quickly, each person focused on their assigned task. Ethan returned to the quantum disruptor, his fingers flying over the console as he ran. Diagnostic tests. The machine hummed faintly, its core glowing a soft blue. Despite its potential power, it still felt fragile, like a tool not meant for the burden being placed upon it. Ethan muttered under his breath as error messages flashed across the screen. "Come on, don't fail me now," he whispered, adjusting settings and rerouting energy flows. Chris Dawson climbed into the outpost's main turret, a small but powerful weapon mounted on the roof. He adjusted the targeting system, his hands steady despite the adrenaline coursing through him. Through the viewport, he could see the distant glow of the approaching ships. They were still far away, but their speed was alarming. "They're coming in hot," he reported over the comms. "Looks like scouts, maybe a dozen of them." Laura Bennett worked quietly in the medical bay, organizing supplies and checking equipment. She tried to focus on her tasks, but her mind kept drifting to the screens showing Earth under attack. Cities burned, oceans boiled, and entire continents were shrouded in smoke. It was hard to believe that billions of lives were being extinguished so quickly. She clenched her fists, forcing herself to stay composed. "We have to hold it together," she murmured to herself. "For them." Back in the control room, Daniel and Rachel studied the incoming ships. The sensors painted a grim picture. The alien vessels were smaller than the massive warships surrounding Earth, but they were still formidable. Their sleek design suggested speed and agility, making them difficult targets. "They're probably probing for survivors," Rachel said, her brow furrowed. "If they find us, they'll call in reinforcements." Daniel nodded. "Then we can't let them get close." He glanced at the timer counting down until the ships reached Europa. 25 minutes. Time was slipping away. Meanwhile, Ethan's discovery of the strange signal beneath Europa's ice had not been forgotten. Between troubleshooting the disruptor, he analyzed the data further. The signal pulsed rhythmically, almost like a beacon. Its origin was deep within the moon's frozen crust, far beyond the outpost's current drilling capabilities. "It's not random," Ethan muttered to himself. "This is deliberate. Someone or something is trying to communicate." He brought his findings to Daniel, who listened intently. "Could it be the aliens?" Daniel asked. Ethan hesitated. "Maybe. but the frequency doesn't match anything we've seen from their ships. It's different. Older, maybe. Daniel frowned. Older how? Hard to say without more data. But if this thing has been here for a long time, it might predate the invasion. Maybe it's some kind of ancient tech left behind by whoever lived here before. The implications were staggering. If there was advanced technology buried beneath Europa's surface, it could change everything. But reaching it would require venturing outside the outpost, drilling through kilometers of ice and risking exposure to the alien ships closing in. We don't have time for that, Daniel said finally. Focus on the disruptor. We'll deal with the signal later, if we survive. As the countdown ticked below 20 minutes, the tension in the outpost grew unbearable. Chris called in another update from the turret. They're spreading out. Looks like they're scanning the area. If they haven't spotted us yet, they will soon. Rachel adjusted the outpost's cloaking systems, trying to mask their heat signature. It was a desperate measure, one that might buy them a few extra minutes, but wouldn't hold up under close scrutiny. Cloak's holding for now, she reported. But if they get too close, they'll see right through it. Ethan's voice crackled over the comms. Disruptor's ready for activation, but I'm still getting instability warnings. Firing it now could overload the core and take out half the outpost. Daniel clenched his jaw. We'll use it as a last resort. Until then, we fight. 15 minutes. The alien ships were closer now, their shapes visible even without magnification. Sleek and menacing, they darted across the void like predators, stalking prey. Chris tracked their movements, his finger hovering over the trigger. Here they come, he said, his voice tight. The first scout ship entered Europa's atmosphere, its engines flaring as it slowed. It hovered above the icy surface, scanning methodically. Another followed, then another. Soon, the outpost was surrounded. The crew held their breath, waiting for the inevitable moment when the aliens would discover them. But then something unexpected happened. One of the ships veered off course, drawn toward the source of the mysterious signal. Its scanners lit up, and it began transmitting bursts of energy into the ice. The other ships paused, seemingly confused by the sudden change in behavior. What's going on? Laura asked, her voice trembling. Ethan stared at the monitors, his eyes wide. They've detected the signal. Whatever it is, they're interested. Daniel seized the opportunity. Rachel, divert all available power to the disruptor. Ethan, stabilize it as best you can. Chris, keep those ships off our backs. The team sprang into action. Rachel rerouted energy from non-essential systems, causing lights to flicker throughout the outpost. Ethan worked feverishly to suppress the disruptor's instability, sweat dripping from his forehead. Chris fired warning shots at the nearest scout ship, forcing it to retreat temporarily. 10 minutes. The alien ships regrouped, their attention divided between the outpost and the signal beneath the ice. For now, the distraction was working. But Daniel knew it wouldn't last. Sooner or later, they would realize the truth, and when they did, the battle would begin in earnest. We're running out of time, Rachel said, her voice strained. Daniel nodded, his expression grim. Then we make every second count. The alien ships hovered above Europa's icy surface, their movements erratic as they tried to make sense of the mysterious signal buried deep within the moon's crust. Some focused on scanning the outpost, while others directed their attention to the source of the beacon. The crew of Outpost Epsilon used this moment of confusion to their advantage, working quickly and quietly to prepare for what was coming next. Commander Daniel Hayes stood in the control room, his eyes fixed on the monitors displaying the positions of the enemy ships. His mind raced with possibilities. If the aliens discovered the outpost, they would attack without hesitation. But if the crew could somehow use the signal to their benefit, they might gain an edge. Ethan, Daniel said sharply, turning to the engineer hunched over the quantum. Disruptor. Can we trace that signal? Find out where it's coming from? Ethan nodded, his fingers flying across the keyboard. Already on it. It's deep, way deeper than we can reach with our current equipment. But I'm getting a clearer picture of its location. He paused, squinting at the data. It's not just one signal. There are multiple sources, all clustered together. Whatever's down there, it's big, Daniel frowned. Big enough to interest the aliens. That means it's worth investigating. Rachel Monroe leaned over Ethan's shoulder, her brow furrowed as she studied the readings. If we go after it, we risk exposing ourselves. Those ships are already suspicious. If they see us drilling into the ice, they'll know we're here. We don't have a choice, Daniel replied firmly. That signal might hold answers or weapons we can use against them. Chris, keep those ships distracted. Laura, stay ready in the medical bay. We're moving forward with this. Chris Dawson, stationed in the turret, acknowledged the order. With a terse nod, he adjusted his aim, targeting the nearest scout ship. A burst of energy erupted from the Outpost's weapon, narrowly missing the alien vessel. The ship veered away, its engines flaring as it reassessed the threat. Got their attention, Chris muttered, his voice tense. For now. Meanwhile, Ethan and Rachel worked together to plot a course to the signal's origin. Using the Outpost's limited drilling equipment, they calculated the fastest route through the ice. It wouldn't be easy. The drills were slow, designed for scientific exploration rather than rapid excavation, and every second they spent outside the outpost increased the risk of detection. Laura Bennett checked her supplies one last time before joining the others in the airlock. Though her role as medic kept her inside most of the time, she insisted on accompanying the team. If something goes wrong out there, you'll need me, she said simply. Daniel didn't argue. They needed every hand they could get. The team, suited up in thermal gear, preparing for the harsh conditions outside. Europa's surface was bitterly cold, with temperatures plunging far below freezing. The wind howled across the barren landscape, carrying shards of ice that stung like needles. As the airlock hissed open, Daniel led the way onto the icy expanse. Behind him, Ethan carried a portable scanner, while Rachel and Laura dragged the heavy drilling equipment. The ground beneath their feet was uneven, riddled with cracks and crevasses. Every step had to be taken carefully to avoid falling through the fragile ice. Above them, the alien ships continued their scans, their movements growing more aggressive. They're getting closer, Rachel warned, glancing skyward. We need to hurry. Ethan adjusted the scanner, pinpointing the exact location of the signal. This way, he said, pointing toward a jagged ridge in the distance. The team pressed on, their breaths visible in the frigid air. The weight of the equipment slowed them down, but no one complained. They knew what was at stake. After what felt like hours, they reached the designated spot. Ethan set up the drill, its motor whining as it began to bore into the ice. The process was slow and laborious, but the scanner confirmed they were heading in the right direction. We're close, Ethan said, his voice muffled by his helmet. Just a little deeper, as the drill penetrated further. The ice around them began to shift. Cracks spread outward, threatening to destabilize the entire area. Laura glanced nervously at the widening fissures. We need to be careful. This whole thing could collapse. I know, Daniel replied, his tone clipped. But we're committed. Now, keep going. Finally, the drill broke through. A rush of cold air escaped from the newly formed hole, carrying with it a faint blue glow. Ethan peered inside, his eyes widening in disbelief. You're not going to believe this, he said, his voice tinged with awe. One by one, the team leaned over the edge, staring into the depths below. What they saw defied explanation. Embedded in the ice was a structure unlike anything they had ever encountered. Sleek and geometric, it pulsed with an eerie light, its surface covered in intricate patterns that seemed to shift and change. Its center was a cluster of crystalline objects, each glowing with the same rhythmic pulse as the signal they had been tracking. What is this? Rachel whispered, her voice trembling. I don't know, Daniel admitted, his gaze fixed on the structure. But it's not natural. Someone built this. Ethan reached into the hole, carefully extracting one of the crystals. It was cool to the touch, yet it emitted a faint hum that resonated through his gloves. This could be important, he said, holding it up for the others to see. It matches the frequency of the quantum disruptor. If we integrate it, We might be able to amplify its power. Daniel hesitated, weighing the risks. Taking the crystal back to the outpost would mean leaving the safety of the ice and exposing themselves to the alien ships. But staying put wasn't an option either. The cracking ice beneath their feet was a constant reminder of the danger they were in. We take it, he decided. But we move fast. The return journey was even more perilous than the trip out. The ice groaned and shifted under their weight, forcing them to navigate carefully. Above them, the alien ships grew bolder, their scanners sweeping the surface in search of the source of the signal. Chris's voice crackled over the comms. They're closing in. You've got maybe 5 minutes before they find you. Understood, Daniel replied, urging the team to pick up the pace. Just hold them off a little longer. Back at the outpost, Rachel and Ethan worked tirelessly to integrate the crystal with the quantum disruptor. The machine's core began to glow brighter, its energy levels spiking dangerously. It's working, Ethan said, his voice filled with both excitement and concern. But the instability is worse than before. Firing this thing could tear the outpost apart. We'll deal with that when it happens, Daniel said grimly. Right now, we need every advantage we can get. Outside, the alien ships descended, their weapons charging. Chris fired repeatedly from the turret, buying precious seconds for the team inside. Laura stood by the disruptor, her hands clenched into fists. Are we ready? She asked, her voice barely audible over the alarms blaring throughout the outpost. Daniel took a deep breath, his hand hovering over the activation button. As ready as we'll ever be. The countdown began. 3 minutes until the alien fleet launched its full assault. 2 minutes, 1 fire, Daniel said, finally pressing the button. The moment Daniel pressed the activation button, the quantum disruptor roared to life. Its core pulsed with an intense blue light, growing brighter and more unstable by the second. The entire outpost shook as energy surged through the machine, amplified by the crystal taken from the buried structure beneath Europa's ice. Alarms blared, warning of critical overloads, but no one moved to stop it. They had come too far to turn back now. Outside, the alien ships closed in, their sleek forms cutting through the darkness like knives, their weapons charged, ready to unleash destruction on the small human outpost. Chris Dawson fired repeatedly from the turret, his shots striking true but failing to penetrate the aliens' shields. They're almost here, he shouted over the comms, his voice strained with effort. Hold on. Inside the control room, Rachel Monroe monitored the disruptor's output, her eyes glued to the screens displaying chaotic streams of data. Energy levels are spiking, she reported, her tone urgent. If this thing goes critical, we're not walking away from it. We knew the risks, Daniel replied, his jaw tight. He stood near the console, his hand still resting on the activation button. His gaze shifted between the monitors showing the approaching ships and the disruptor itself. Sweat dripped down his face, but he didn't wipe it away. Every second felt like an eternity. Ethan Cole worked frantically to stabilize the machine, his fingers flying over the controls. Sparks flew from overloaded circuits and the air grew thick with the smell of burning metal. I'm doing everything I can, he muttered, his voice barely audible over the hum of the disruptor. But this thing wasn't built for this kind of power. Laura Bennett stood nearby, clutching a medical kit tightly in her hands. She wanted to help, but there was nothing she could do except wait. Her heart pounded in her chest as she watched the disruptor's core glow brighter and brighter. The walls of the outpost vibrated violently, threatening to collapse under the strain. It's going to blow, she whispered, fear creeping into her voice. No, it won't, Daniel snapped, though even he wasn't entirely sure. He turned to Ethan. How much longer? 30 seconds, Ethan replied, his voice cracking under pressure. Maybe less. The alien ships were nearly upon them now, their weapons locking onto the outpost. Beams of energy lanced out, striking the surface around the facility. Ice exploded into the air, sending shards flying in all directions. The impact rocked the outpost, knocking Laura off her feet. She scrambled to get up, her eyes wide with panic. Chris, fall back, Daniel ordered. Get inside now. Chris hesitated, firing one last shot before abandoning the turret. He sprinted toward the airlock, narrowly avoiding a blast that tore through the icy ground behind him. As soon as he entered the outpost, he slammed the door shut and sealed it behind him. "That's it," he said breathlessly. "We're out of time." The countdown reached 0. With a deafening roar, the quantum disruptor unleashed its full power. A wave of energy erupted from the outpost, spreading outward in every direction. It was invisible to the naked eye, but carried a force strong enough to destabilize anything in its path. The alien ships closest to Europa disintegrated instantly, their advanced shields unable to withstand the disruption. Further away, the larger vessels faltered, their systems crippled by the sudden surge of energy. Inside the outpost, the crew braced themselves against the walls as the shock wave rippled through the structure. Lights flickered and died, plunging the control room into near darkness. The disruptor's core dimmed, its glow fading as the energy dissipated. For a moment, there was only silence. Then slowly, the reality of what had happened began to sink in. Rachel checked the sensors, her hands trembling as she reviewed the data. "It worked," she said finally, her voice filled with disbelief. "Their fleet is gone." Daniel exhaled sharply, leaning heavily against the console. His legs felt weak, and his body ached from the strain of the past hours. But relief washed over him as he realized they had succeeded. Against all odds, they had held off the Galactic Armada, at least for now. Ethan slumped into a chair, his face pale but triumphant. "That was insane," he muttered, shaking his head. "I can't believe we pulled it off." Laura sank to the floor, her knees buckling beneath her. Tears streamed down her face, though whether from exhaustion or joy she couldn't say. "We did it," she whispered, hugging the medical kit close to her chest. "We actually did it." Chris leaned against the wall, his breathing still ragged from the sprint back inside. He glanced at the others, a faint smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "What now?" Daniel straightened, forcing himself to focus. The battle might have been won, but the war was far from over. Earth remained silent, its fate unknown. And the mysterious structure beneath Europa's ice still held unanswered questions. "Now," he said firmly, "we regroup. We assess the damage and figure out our next move. If any of those ships survived, they'll be back. We need to be ready." As the team began picking up the pieces, their thoughts turned to the future. The quantum disruptor had saved them this time, but it was clear they couldn't rely on it forever. The artifact they had retrieved, and the structure it came from, might hold further secrets that could tip the scales in humanity's favor. But reaching it again would require venturing back into the ice, risking exposure to whatever forces still lurked in the shadows of space. For now, Outpost Epsilon stood as a beacon of hope amidst the ruins of war. Its crew had proven that even the smallest spark of resistance could ignite a flame bright enough to drive back the darkness. Though vastly outnumbered and outgunned, they had shown that humanity's spirit could not be so easily extinguished. The crew of Outpost Epsilon gathered in the dimly lit control room, their faces illuminated by the faint glow of emergency lights. The quantum disruptor sat silent in the corner, its core dark and lifeless, after expending all its energy. The outpost itself was a mess, walls cracked, equipment damaged, and the air thick with the smell of burnt circuits. But despite the chaos around them, there was a sense of quiet triumph. They had survived against impossible odds. Commander Daniel Hayes stood at the center of the room, his posture weary but determined. He glanced at each member of his team, taking stock of their condition. Ethan Cole, the engineer, was slumped in a chair, his glasses askew and his hands trembling from exhaustion. Rachel Monroe leaned against a console, her arms crossed tightly as if to hold herself together. Chris Dawson paced back and forth, his restless energy betraying the adrenaline still coursing through him. Laura Bennett sat on the floor, her legs stretched out in front of her, staring blankly at the wall. "We did it," Daniel said finally, breaking the silence. His voice was low but steady. "But we're not done yet." Rachel nodded, her expression grim. "Earth is still silent. We don't know if anyone else made it. The thought hung heavy in the air. For days they had been trying to re-establish contact with Earth, but every attempt ended in failure. The once bustling planet remained eerily quiet, its cities reduced to ash and rubble. Whether any survivors remained, or whether humanity's cradle had been wiped clean, was a question none of them dared to answer aloud. Ethan cleared his throat, drawing everyone's attention. "What about the structure?" he asked hesitantly. "The one we found under the ice. It's important, maybe even more important than the disruptor." Daniel frowned. The buried structure beneath Europa's surface had been the key to their victory, its crystalline artifacts amplifying the disruptor's power enough to turn the tide of battle. But it also raised troubling questions. Who, or what, had built it? And why had the alien armada shown such interest in it? "We need answers," Daniel said firmly. "If that thing holds technology capable of stopping those ships, we can't leave it buried. Not when Earth might still need us." Chris stopped pacing and turned to face him. "You're talking about going back out there? After what just happened?" "It's risky," Daniel admitted. "But we can't afford to sit here and wait. If the aliens come back, and they probably will, we need to be ready." Laura looked up, her eyes wide with concern. "The ice is unstable. Last time we barely made it out alive. What happens if the whole thing collapses while we're down there?" "We'll take precautions," Daniel replied. "We'll reinforce the drills, map safer routes, and keep an eye on the structural integrity of the ice. It won't be easy, but we don't have a choice." Rachel stepped forward, her tone resolute. "I'm with you. Whatever's down there, we need to find out. For Earth." One by one, the others agreed. Though fear lingered in their expressions, determination outweighed it. They had come too far to give up now. The next morning, the team prepared for their second expedition into the ice. This time they moved with greater caution, using reinforced equipment and carefully plotting their path based on data collected during their previous trip. The journey was slow and grueling, the icy landscape as unforgiving as ever. Above them, the sky remained ominously clear, free of alien ships, for now. When they reached the site of the buried structure, Ethan set up the drill again, this time working methodically to widen the opening. As the ice gave way, revealing more of the mysterious artifact, the team marveled at its intricate design. The structure seemed to hum softly, its glowing patterns shifting in response to their presence. "This isn't just tech," Ethan murmured, running his fingers along the smooth surface. "It's alive, or at least aware." Daniel knelt beside him, studying the crystalline objects embedded within the structure. "Can we use it?" he asked. "Not just to fight, but to communicate, to find out who built this." Ethan hesitated, then nodded. "Maybe. But interfacing with something like this, it's dangerous. We could trigger something we don't understand." "Then we proceed carefully," Daniel said. "We've faced worse." Over the next several hours, the team worked tirelessly to extract additional crystals and analyze the structure's mechanisms. Each discovery brought new insights but also new risks. At one point, the ground beneath them began to tremble violently, forcing them to retreat temporarily. When the shaking subsided, they returned to their task, driven by a shared sense of purpose. As night fell over Europa, the team returned to the outpost, carrying fragments of the ancient technology with them. Back in the control room, Ethan and Rachel worked together to integrate the new crystals with what remained of the quantum disruptor. Their goal was no longer just defense, it was communication. If they could decipher the structure's signals, they might be able to reach out to whoever had created it, or even to remnants of humanity still clinging to survival on Earth. Days turned into weeks as the crew poured all their energy into unlocking the secrets of the artifact. Progress was slow, marked by setbacks and breakthroughs alike, but through it all, their resolve never wavered. They were the last line of defense for humanity, and they refused to surrender. Finally, one evening, Ethan called the team into the control room. His face was pale but lit with excitement. "I think I've got something," he said, his voice trembling with anticipation. On the monitor before him, lines of code scrolled rapidly, forming patterns that resembled language. "What is it?" Rachel asked, leaning closer. "It's a message," Ethan replied. "Or part of one. It's repeating coordinates." Daniel's eyes narrowed. "Coordinates for what?" "I don't know yet," Ethan admitted. "But they're pointing, somewhere deep in space, beyond our solar system." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Whoever had built the structure, and whatever purpose it served, was tied to something far greater than they had imagined. "We follow it," Daniel said finally, his voice firm. "If it leads us to allies, to answers, or even to hope, we go. For Earth. For humanity." No one argued. Though the path ahead was uncertain, they knew one thing for sure. Outpost Epsilon would not fade into the void. Against all odds, they had held the line. And now, they would carry the fight forward, to the stars themselves.